The growing firestorm surrounding controversial remarks by freshman Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has prompted her own party to take action. House Democrats are poised to vote on a resolution broadly condemning anti-Semitism in response to Omar's recent comments, including her suggestion that supporters of Israel's government have, quote, an allegiance to a foreign country, a comment critics say plays into a long-standing attack that Jews cannot be considered loyal citizens of their home countries. The resolution does not call out Omar by name, who is Muslim, but Republicans are now threatening to pass a censure motion which would. Omar herself has been targeted by racist criticism, including a West Virginia protest linking her with the 9/11 terror attacks. Joining me now is Jennifer Palmieri, former White House Communications Director for the Obama administration and former Communications Director for Hillary Clinton's campaign, Washington Post opinion writer and MSNBC contributor Jonathan Capehart, and Kimberly Atkins, senior Washington News correspondent for WBUR, also an MSNBC contributor. Jen Palmieri, first to you. Are the Democrats in a bind on this? Here they have a freshman congresswoman. She is a minority, being a Muslim in Congress, and now she's made these comments, and they feel pressured to take some action.
Mm-hmm. I mean, if they were in a bind, being in a bind means that they weren't taking action. So I don't think that they find themselves in a bind because they are taking action to have a resolution to reaffirm that concern about anti-Semitism. And beyond this incident, there are you see a lot of examples of it in America today. I go back to the Tree of Life synagogue massacre. So there's a lot of reason for concern. Beyond Rep. Omar. But if you, she is a duly elected member of Congress who is sitting on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And if she has arguments against policy towards Israel, American policy towards Israel, she should voice that. What I think is where you get into trouble is when you start talking about people's motivations generally, and that's true in politics generally, very true here, and start talking about allegiances to other governments that has a history as anti-Semitism, but also it's the kind of trope that you hear said against Muslim Americans as well. So I understand why they're taking that action to affirm that kind of language is not suitable, and I think that you can have policy disagreements. It's when you get into these motivations and questioning allegiances that it becomes problematic.
Indeed. Now, she has support today from AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, tweeting today that one of the things that is hurtful about the extent to which reprimand is sought of Ilhan is that no one seeks this level of reprimand when members make statements about Latinx and other communities. During the shutdown, a GOP member yelled, "Go back to Puerto Rico," on the floor. Jonathan?
Yes,
she's got a point.
Well, yes, she does have a point. This is not to say that the controversy surrounding Congresswoman Omar is not legitimate, but there seems to be selective outrage. And when it's been coming from the Republican side of the aisle is mute. They don't hold their members accountable for anything.
Belatedly on Steve King, much belatedly, years too late.
Decades too late on Congressman Steve King. So I think we can, and I think Jen is absolutely right, that when you get into the motivations of people, that's where you get into trouble. And I think the other area where Congresswoman Omar gets into trouble is, remember, she's a freshman member of Congress. She is part of this class of activists that are making the transition from the streets to the inside, to the halls of power. And there's a completely different way of behavior, of ways of doing things. And what we're seeing now in real time and uncomfortably is she is learning, or at least I hope she's learning what she's going through and how she can still change her behavior without changing how she thinks or what she believes.
And we saw that, Kimberly, just last week in the oversight hearing with Michael Cohen, when there was that clash with one of the freshman members against Mark Meadows, and realizing that there are congressional rules that you can actually be brought in front of the ethics committee if you attack another member.
Yes, with Rashida Tlaib and her comments about the act by Mark Meadows of bringing a black woman to use as a prop, essentially. And she used the word racist. He returned the term racist back at her, and it turned into this thing until the next day when they hugged it out. But look, I think this is one of the problems when we have issues like this. We have the censure, or not censure, but this resolution that really doesn't do anything but condemn anti-Semitism. I think we can universally agree that anti-Semitism is bad. Are we having the conversations about the difference between criticizing Israeli policy and promoting anti-Semitic tropes and where the difference of that line is? Are we having discussions with members of the Jewish community that Congresswoman Omar could take part in? Something that could actually lead to some understanding? No. I feel like there's, certainly on the Republican side, a race to equate what she did to what Steve King did.
There's no moral equivalency.
And there's not. And it's completely different, but there's also no advancing the cause of fighting anti-Semitism or in talking about U.S.-Israeli relations. It's sort of just an impasse.
Let me also switch topics for a moment and talk about gender equity for women's athletics in this White House. Jen Palmieri, the president yesterday hosted a Division II NCAA football team, the North Dakota State Bison, at the White House, serving them fast food. But still, to this point, Christine Brennan, the great sports writer, has pointed out that there has not been a women's sports team individually celebrated at the White House. Despite the WNBA, champs coming to Washington year after year, they've done days of service, but they've never been invited the way the men's teams are invited by this White House.
Least surprising news of the day. And I don't know, obviously, why they haven't. If I fear it may not have even occurred to them. I can imagine them having a strategy to say, we're not going to do this, we're not bringing women athletes here, but I bet it didn't even occur to them that that is something that they're supposed to do. It's not something, women's performance and excelling in sports is not a priority.
David Nakamura has written in the Washington Post that not a single women's championship team has made a solo visit to the White House under Trump, although several women's teams participated in an event in 2017 during which the president celebrated numerous men and women's college championships. Kimberly?
Yeah, I mean, you would think as many sports teams have boycotted going to the White House under the Trump administration that he'd want to bring as many as he could into the White House at this time. It's really inexplicable why women would, well, it is explicable why women would be left off. It's unfortunate.
Jonathan, Kimberly, and Jen, thank you so much. Maybe this David Nakamura's piece and Christine Brennan's writing will wake them up. And coming up, punishing North Korea.